Welcome to Dr. Aileen McCabe-Moucher's Innerpeace Diet Podcast. Real solutions for an authentic and peaceful life.
Hi there, welcome to the Innerpeace Diet Podcast. My name is Dr. Aileen McCabe-Moucher and I am your host. I am a licensed psychotherapist, clinical social worker, college professor, and author of the book, The Innerpeace Diet. But most importantly, I am a human being just like you, trying my best to live a healthy and peaceful lifestyle during these chaotic and uncertain times that we find ourselves living in. So the purpose of this podcast is to bring you some authentic and effective stress management and self-care tools that you can use in your own life to reduce your stress and lead a more peaceful and joyful lifestyle. Today, I have the privilege and honor of interviewing Dr. Janeen-Cross. Dr. Cross is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, and she has over 20 years of experience completing clinical assessments, counseling, and intervention services to clients. Dr. Cross also is a professor, licensed clinical social worker, and consultant that teaches graduate-level social work courses and facilitates workshops and professional presentations for numerous professional organizations. So again, Janeen, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to do this interview. I really appreciate it because you've got a ton of wisdom to share. You're a longtime social work practitioner. You're a writer. You're a professor. You're out there making big changes in terms of policy. So we've got a lot of wisdom in a lot of different areas. And I guess
Aileen, thank you. Aileen, thank you for having me. I know that you could have picked anybody else to do this, and I know with your connections and all the people that you know, you could have offered this opportunity to many people, but you chose me, and I truly appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, Janeen. Thank you. It's like you're tops. You're very, very well respected and seasoned, and you also just straight talk, give us a lot of wisdom that's rooted in actual practice experience and things that work. So today we're going to be talking about self-care. And I know that, we were chatting before the interview started, and I was telling you how, I feel like a hypocrite some days because I'm writing this book and doing these interviews, all this work about self-care. And, I'm clocking 70 hours a week in work. So, usually I like to have a little bit more balance in my life, but I'm in one of the seasons right now where it's very busy, and I feel very fortunate to have the work, because, there's a lot of people out here today that are struggling and just would like to have one job. But all that said, when thinking about caring for yourself, what do you think is the best self-care advice that you received that actually works for you?
Yes, Aileen, I have to completely agree with you. Sometimes when we're talking about self-care, we're not doing ourselves or the people we have these discussions with any type of service when we don't first look at, are we practicing what we preach? And I think being social workers and clinical social workers, it's so easy to get tied down in the work-life balance to where you realize it, you look up, you're at the end of the week. Like you said, you put in 70 hours and you haven't practiced any of your own self-care rhetoric, if you will, and practices. It's rhetoric, but it's rhetoric to encourage practice. So one of the best self-care advice that I received is just to prioritize yourself or prioritize the self. And what I mean by that is put yourself first. We like to play on the words when we talk about using first person language, but I really think that we need to use first person in our application to our self-care. And it starts off with the mindset that you must come first in your own life. You must come first when it comes to your professional career, and you must come first when it comes to your personal and family life as well. And with that awareness that you come first, you'll start to be better able to incorporate self-care activities into your daily activities, your weekly activities, and your monthly activities as well.
That's beautifully said, Janeen. Thank you. And it's so important. And I never really thought of it in the way that you just described, really putting the self first. That was great. There's a lot of sort of advice out there. If you look on Facebook or social media, sort of like quick tips, things that work to reduce your stress, like sort of magical cures and things that people are touting. What do you think is the worst self-care advice that either you personally received or you think that's sort of out there floating around? Things that maybe sound great but aren't really that useful?
Right. And I think that's a very interesting question, actually. And the reason why I think that question is so interesting is because it doesn't appear the worst advice you ever received when you hear it. It actually seems like a workable plan. But then you later on think about it and I'm like, well, wait a minute, how is that really helping? And I'll give you an example. In general, I would say the worst advice that you usually get related to self-care is usually a temporary fix, right? It tends to address like more of the symptoms of the self-care problem instead of the self-care problem itself. So sometimes people will tell you to do things that will help you get a burst of energy when you're tired, like a caffeinated drink. You know what I mean? Oh, drink some coffee. Oh, just drink a Red Bull, or just do this quick fix, and you'll get this burst of energy, and you'll be good, right?
Yeah.
Or sometimes, and it does work, but it's very temporary, right? Mm-hmm. And then sometimes they'll tell you to self-medicate, and I'm getting clinical, but usually that's just have a glass of wine. Go over there, go somewhere and have a drink. You'll be good and unwind and so forth. And the reason why I say that there's danger in that type of advice is that it draws attention, in my opinion, away from the need to rest and to prioritize yourself. Okay. So usually if you're running for a caffeinated beverage or, your caffeine fix, that's really a symptom of you're not getting enough rest or you need some rest. You need to take a nap. You need to get a good night's sleep. And yeah, you can do the quick, short energy burst, but long term, is that serving your needs and your well-being, right? Mm-hmm. And same thing with the wine. I mean, it may do it for you on a Friday evening, but then, with the wine, it's a way of again, self-medicating and saying, well, you know what, if I have to go reaching for a glass of wine every time I'm stressed, then that may be a sign that I'm not incorporating self-care activities in my daily life, right?
Yeah. Oh, that was great, Janeen. And that's really usable advice, because so many times what we're suggesting or what we see others suggesting to clients are really like Band-Aids, like you're saying, and they can be harmful when you're not addressing the issue at its core.
Yes.
And you just illustrated so beautifully how the basics are so important when it comes to sleep and rest and rejuvenation, and not just constantly pushing ourselves to, get that boost or relax a little bit and really address the issue of caring for the self at its core.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. I sort of had the great privilege when I was little. My grandmother was a yoga teacher. She had breast cancer in the 1960s and had a really transformative healing experience. She studied yoga, went on to be a yoga teacher. So I grew up, she would teach yoga at her place, have people over. Like, it was very different than the way yoga is taught today in 2017. So I had like a lot of early exposure to the practice, which, I'm fortunate. But I have to say that it wasn't so much sometimes the yoga itself, like the breathing exercises or the physical aspects that was so valuable to me. It was how my grandmother sort of conducted herself. Like when she had her yoga practice in the morning, or when she had students, she would say, you know, Eileen, this is my time. So, you know, you go over there and read your book, or, you know, go outside, you know, go play. But this is my time to take care of myself or to teach. So, you know, she's like in that she was a really great role model. I mean, I do have memories of being 4 and trying to make toast while she was busy teaching yoga class. It didn't wind up working out too well. But just being that role model, you know, as a parent, that it's okay to take time for the self. All that said, what do you wish that you learned in childhood about self-care and stress management, or what do you think is really important to teach this next generation while they're young about self-care?
Okay. A couple of things, actually. One of the things that I've learned is that, you know, self-care can be basic activities, you know, that don't really require a lot of time, and they don't have to be expensive. They can be fairly inexpensive, things that you do daily or routinely to take care of yourself, right? And I also think that some of the best self-care activities tend to be more preventative, with a wellness focus, similar to like you stated with your grandmother and her yoga activities. It's something that she did routinely. It was a wellness focus, and it's preventative in that it really does a good job at keeping stress from ever creeping up. I mean, it's going to happen anyway, but it's one of those defensive, preventative defensive tasks that you can do every single day, right?
Yeah.
I know sometimes we take for granted some of the things that we are actually doing in our lives that are self-care. And it's just about how you're perceiving those activities. So one of the things, an example that I can give you is that a lot of times people don't think of their wellness visits as self-care. But to me, it epitomizes self-care. You know, if you're going to your routine appointments with your primary care doctor, that's a form of self-care. If you're, you know, going to your yearly dental cleanings, and that's a form of self-care. There are people that see therapists before things get bad. You know, they have learned that it works for them. Therapy is helpful. And then it's like a light bulb goes off. I don't have to wait until my depression symptoms get so bad. I don't have to wait till my anxiety gets out of control. You know, I actually, you know, there's some people who come and see therapists and have come to see me as well, saying, I do this as my self-care. Yeah. There's nothing really horribly wrong, but the point is I don't want it to get to that point. So I'd rather, you know, see somebody regularly, whether that's every couple weeks or every few weeks, or, you know, it's individual and it's very personal, what you need to stay well. And that's something you can do. So in that aspect, timing is also very, very important. So again, I think, you know, we don't look at self-care as holistic, one, and then oftentimes we don't realize that timing of the self-care is so important. And that's something that I've learned over time, and I wish I had learned that earlier.
Yeah, Janeen, that was beautiful. You said so many really important things there, especially in terms of the timing, right? And I think it takes a lot of insight, which you certainly have, to really be aware of sort of when you may be getting in the danger zone or when your tank is getting low, right? So you know that's time. I'm glad that you said that, because it is important to develop and then sort of maintain that awareness about timing and self-care. When you think about self-care on a personal level, Janeen, what do you think is sort of like your go-to self-care strategy, your self-reduction or stress reduction technique?
Now, don't laugh, Aileen, because it's nothing fancy by any means. It's not fancy. It's one thing that is my go-to, and it's a hot bath. It is a hot bath, and let me explain to you what it does for me. I've actually noticed as I've gotten older, it's just something about water, aquatics, that really provide a peace for me in a way that no other thing can. So I do exercise routinely, and that's helpful for me. But I don't get that relaxation feeling like I do with a hot bath. And I prefer that because it's something that's very inexpensive. It only requires about 15 or 20 minutes of your time, right? You know, yeah. I like it. I like taking hot baths with bath salts and aromatherapy candles. And to me, it's like the hot water relaxes my muscles. And at the same time, the scents from the candle or the bath salts really calms my mind. And then for me, I notice that the steamy bathroom tends to really enhance my quality of breathing. So it's like I get like this whole holistic, experience for the senses that's really relaxing and calming. Not to mention, most of the time, all the time, well, maybe, let me think about that. I do have a young child. But anyway, it's a space where you're by yourself and it's quiet. For the most part, yes. 9 times out of 10, no one should come barging in there, especially if you remember to lock the door. But my point is, you've removed yourself into a very quiet, serene place for a period of time, and it's almost as if it's protected time for you to relax the senses and to come out and away from the stresses of life.
Yes. Oh, Janeen, I love that. You're inspiring me to take a bath. And you described that like so poetically, using like all of the senses there. That's great. Can you come visit me at our new house here where we moved to in New Jersey? Wait till you see my bathtub. I invite you to come take a bath here. It's the reason why I was like sold on the house. Like I walked in and like, this is it. This is the most magical bathtub I've ever seen. I don't get into it as much as I want to, but now after talking with you, I'm going to calendar getting in that bathtub because you're inspiring me.
Aileen, my dream house has an elaborate tub, and if it doesn't come when I buy it, it will be like the first thing on the plans. We're doing the bathroom because I need a good quality bathtub.
Yes,
I can all the other fringe bit I can do without. That's a need. That's on the need list. It really is.
Yeah, it is really important. And, as you're talking, like I'm thinking about over the years, like all the different places that I've lived in, all the different apartments. And, I'm remembering that how many years I spent without a tub, like all it was a shower. And it's like, wow, some of us are sort of, we're depriving or we're deprived or depriving ourselves of things and not even thinking about it. Something as simple as a bath can be a really powerful self-care tool.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the whole concept of practicing clinically, and over the years I've had clients that have come to me, as I'm sure you have. They're really seeking like that quick fix or like a magical cure for anxiety, depression, time, poverty. What's the closest thing? Now we know that there's no quick fix, but what do you think is the closest thing that you could recommend to clients as a stress reliever that you can feel confident that actually works or would, that they would be somewhat successful with?
So first of all, I want to say you hit the nail right on the head when you said there is no quick fix. And one of the first things I work with in terms of talking to clients very early in therapy sessions is that the first thing we need to do is dispel the notion that there is a quick fix. Mm-hmm. I can probably relieve the first 10-15% of your anxiety by dispelling that notion, because if your expectations of therapy is that you're going to get a quick fix out of it, you're either going to become more depressed, you're going to become more anxious because you're going to wonder why it's not working. And it really wasn't made to work that way. And even when you think about, I think, brief therapy, that's even relative, in that it requires a certain amount of devotion of time and a significant amount of time to be insightful and to really work on whatever problems or issues that you bring to the table. So there is definitely no waving of a magic wand in order to do that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
The only method that I know that may serve to help is implementing self-care activities as a prevention and a wellness strategy throughout your life. And what I mean by that is by having those routine things that you do that addresses self-care, and I named a few of them earlier, I'm of the belief that you have a potential for turning around stress, depression, perhaps anxiety symptoms more quickly if you already have regular routines to support the self. Yes. And the reason why I feel that is because I would argue that if you have any anxiety or depression symptoms, that you're in a better position to manage them, and then they become less debilitating if you're already in self-care practices, right? When you're already implementing prevention and wellness routines. And again, prevention and wellness routines do not guarantee that things don't happen, that you're not going to get sick. You're going to always stay mentally and physically well. That's not really what it means. It's really keeping your body and your mind and your spirit at its strongest most of the time, so that when it is impacted by some kind of trauma or insult, whether that be stress, whether it be actual physical sickness, your body is best poised to address it. So to me, the quick fix is keeping yourself as well as possible so that when you experience these things, you're better able to bounce back, and most likely more quickly. You can bounce back more quickly than somebody who is not implementing these routine practices in their daily lives.
Yeah, so well said. That's so important to have that routine established. So when you go through those seasons of life, whether that be a personal illness or an illness of someone that you love, when you take those hits or you experience those negative emotions, you have a practice that you're rooted in, that you could sort of go back to.
I agree.
Now, I know of one of your many roles and areas of expertise is that of being a scholar and being a professor. So I know that certainly in my role as a professor, I deal with students who, I just think that they're so gifted and they have such great intentions, especially in sort of like those early years of social work practice and learning, having all these great sort of ideas, wanting to get out there, wanting to change the world. But then you can sort of see them burning out, as they burn the candle at both ends, especially in today's political climate, right, which is exposing widespread racism and sexism and all of those things. So we have students that really want to get out there and change the world and advocate for things. But then when we're talking with them, we're sort of noticing that they have really deficits in their own self-care. So sort of pointing out to them, listen, it's sort of like you get that advice that we get when you go onto an airplane, right? You've got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you can reach out and help somebody else. How do you, what kind of words of wisdom could you give to a student that may be really struggling with wanting to get out there and make change, but yet still caring for themselves?
So, Aileen, I'm going to talk a little bit about my job, if you don't mind here for a minute, and it really incorporates the answer that you're actually talking about, right? I'm an assistant professor at Howard University, right? And it's a really good fit for me for many reasons. One because there are so many philosophies and principles that are core principles that are tied to the school that really match match my philosophies. And it really, really, I think oftentimes gets missed by students that the principles of the school itself is a form of self-care, and I'll explain. The Black perspective and the 6 guiding principles within the Black perspective at the School of Social Work at Howard, they really, really exemplify self-care. And I'm not sure if many people really observe it that way. The 6 principles are affirmation, strength, diversity, diversification, social justice, and internationalization, right? And when they're talking about affirmation, it signifies the liberation, richness, productivity, and vigor in the lives of people of color. When they talk about strength, it's to address and I think cope with oppression, particularly of Black people. It talks about diversity, which is, the rich and complex variations of people of color. When we're talking about vivifying, we're talking about the renewed sense of Black life and inclusivity in a positive way. Social justice and internationalization, right? We can expand these philosophies that I'm talking about of affirmation, diversity, and strength. We can expand that philosophy globally and within our own United States, right? In the pursuit of service, right, to undeserved populations and people, right? So that is the Black perspective, right? That's when you come to Howard and say, I want to pursue studies here. We make sure that you're aware that this is our philosophy, this is our practice, right?
Yes.
But we also weave the Black perspective into the assignments that we give. So we're really telling them this is what we're about, but we're also reinforcing that in almost every class that they have, that every assignment has a component in which they have to incorporate the Black perspective. And so one of the things you may be thinking is, okay, well, how is that self-care necessarily, right? Mm-hmm. So to me, it talks about some of the things I discussed earlier. It requires you to prioritize the self, right?
Yes.
And it is consistent with self-care because it is a way of life. It's not limited to a single activity to feel better. It's not just, take a bath. This is a way that I can incorporate a philosophy of wellness and prevention into my daily activities, right?
Yes.
It's also a strengths-focused agenda. Mm-hmm. And in terms of prevention, it addresses, hopefully, social justices through scholarly contributions and as well as research and service to the community. So I'm not sure if, many students look at it as a self-care philosophy, but it is. And then oftentimes when you think about the Black self-concept, the self is a collective self as well. Mm-hmm. Right. So for me, if you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of the community, right? When you're prioritizing yourself, you're prioritizing the needs of the Black community. When you're focused on wellness of the self, you're focusing also on the wellness of the community. So for me, self-care equals community self-care, preservation, and wellness. And I think that's something that we definitely need to do. And I think also we use that Black perspective to respond to a lot of what is going on politically. This is racism. This is sexism. This is making sure that we address, we form a response that is strength-based, it's positive. And even though it's called the Black perspective, if you really listen to the core of it and the foundation and the principles, they're applied to all. It's a humanities perspective.
Yes. Yes.
And so again, we call it the Black perspective, but it's an inclusive perspective meant to be affirming, reaffirming, and supportive of all groups. And I think that is what is needed in today's political climate.
Yeah. Oh, Janeen, that is so powerful. I'm blown away. That's a book right there in and of itself, the beautiful philosophy, but you just articulated so many ways that students can actually apply the Black perspective to their own lives. That's, and as you were talking, I was thinking that it's so important for us to be a part of communities where the values of that community, of that institution, are in alignment with our own personal values. And I'm so glad to hear that you're at Howard and doing this amazing, important work, because there needs to be more of this out there in the world, more of this happening. Not only the recognition and the awareness of discrimination and oppression and racism, but actually taking steps to make changes. And you're doing that. You just really sketched out a beautiful framework on how that can happen.
Thank you.
How do you think that we can sort of balance self-care and service to the community? And I know that you really answered that so beautifully just now, but sometimes, when I'm working with students or clients, they'll say, Aileen, I just don't have, an extra half hour a day. Maybe I have 4 children, or I have an aging parent, and I have a caseload of 50 people that I have to go see all within this 2-week time period. Plus, I may be involved with my church or doing volunteer work or school. Is there sort of like a perfect or at least workable type of a schedule that maybe you could offer to a student or a client about balancing self-care and service to the community or service to others?
Mm-hmm. Can you hear me okay? I put my headphones on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good.
Clear.
So I'll start off with how I started off earlier in this interview about the perspective of prioritizing the self. I said, when you think about self-care, you have to start off with first accepting, or at least developing, a mindset of putting the self first. I also feel that it's very similar with self-care and community service, where it's a perspective. And for me, one is not void of the other. So I'll try to be more clear in what I'm trying to say. I think if you view community service as a form of self-care, by taking care of yourself, you're also providing a service to the community. And by providing services to the community, you're also taking care of yourself as a member of that community. One of the things I think of when I'm thinking about the work-life balance is, from a career perspective, if you have some flexibility and you're able to align the mission, the vision, the values of the organization and it's a good fit for you with your own personal values, you're able to find self-care avenues professionally, and that you're taking tasks on that provide a fulfillment for you. So one of the things for me is mentorship. That's something that that is expected as your role as a leader or assistant professor, to provide some form of mentorships to students and that are actually in your course, or students that you may be advising. And that's something that really fulfills me. I get enjoyment from it. So for me, that's a form of self-care, to be able to mentor someone because I'm enjoying what I'm doing. It's a stress reliever for me because I enjoy it. When you're thinking about the family life balance, again, I think sometimes we think of it as a conflict. Okay, if I'm at work, I can't do the family. If I'm, working with the family, if I'm with the family, I can't be at work. But if we look at it holistically as a self-care, I can go to work and get self-care and be happy about what I'm doing. And it's not a conflict, because there's some fulfillment for me. And then when I'm at home or with the family, I make sure that the activities that I'm engaged in, that I'm really enjoying, instead of looking at it like, oh, this is something else I have to do. So for me, on a personal note, my daughter is in Girl Scout. And so as part of Girl Scout, she does a lot of service projects. So we're in the community, we're stacking diapers, we're organizing, we're cleaning, we're doing community day, we're doing, those type activities, which again, they fall within my value system. They are things that I want to do. We're giving back to the community, and by default, we're giving back to ourselves, because by supporting the community, supporting yourself, that's where the balance comes. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, we're not balancing the tasks themselves. The balance and the alignment comes through, is this a good fit with my personal values, my personal mission statement? Am I getting fulfillment from these things? And so if I am, then there is no conflict. The conflict is in my head. Yes. If that makes sense.
That was crystal clear. That was fantastic, Janeen. And it's really, it's about that mind shift, that mindset shift. And we're thinking, you have the ability to really help shift minds and perspectives, because so often when we think about self-care, we're working with clients and they'll hear the word self-care and they'll think it's this thing that has to happen when I'm in my house alone, and they're not really thinking as broadly as you are, where it really reflects your personal mission statement. And self-care can happen when you're at work, when you're volunteering, when you're with your family. It's really a matter of your own personal value system and priorities.
Thank you.
Janeen, is there anything else that you haven't said about self-care or stress management that you think is really important for other people to hear or learn about?
I think I covered, the main points that I wanted to make. And I just want to make sure I stress, that we broaden our view of self-care and not limit or restrict it to a task sometimes, to not limit it and restrict it to a one-time irregular occurrence, and really shift our perspective on self-care to a holistic approach. That can be something that can be seen at work. It can be something that can be seen in your personal life. And I think sometimes, or I would say oftentimes, we're not trained to think of self-care as something we take with us every day from a philosophical perspective. It's a way of life and a way of viewing the world that keeps us well all the time.
Yes. Yeah. Janeen, thank you so much. Dr. Janeen-Cross, you provided us with so much wisdom today, and I'm very grateful for all of your time and your attention to this really important topic.
Thank you so much again for having me. I, feel very blessed to be able to share some of my views with you on self-care. And I hope that, people take heed to at least some of the points that I made today, and they're able to live more healthy, well lives, and establish that work-life school balance for students that keeps them fulfilled.
Yes. Thank you so much, Janeen.
Please visit www.theinnerpeacediet.com to enroll in Dr. Eileen's free online course. 3 days to a more peaceful life.